We're continuing tonight our discussion of the history of Saubhari Muni as he himself portrays it. We'll go over his realizations, which he expresses in a very concise and powerful way. Remember about Saubhari Muni, he had it all. He went into it big time with his mystic power, achieving opulence and material pleasures that even the emperor of the world, Mandata Maharaj, was embarrassed by. His own opulence couldn't compare to what Saubhari Muni created by his mystic power. Just think about that dramatic transformation. Submerged underwater for hundreds of years. Wrinkled, old, body trembling. Totally unattractive. In fact, he would repulse anyone. Ugh. But his austerities had equipped him with extraordinary mystic powers. Extraordinary when seen from the material point of view. Just remember, nothing compares to Bhakti mysticism. Ordinary mysticism simply increases your material powers, but Bhakti mysticism gets you out of the material world and attached to Krishna. So you all have that opportunity for the topmost mysticism, the perfection of mysticism. Krishna is known as Yogeshwara, the master of all mystic powers. He bestows his foremost mystic powers upon his devotees. The foremost mystic power is pure love. And that pure love is what drives Srimad Bhagavatam. So we want to again repeat the verses by Srila Sanatana Goswami, the verses we began class yesterday with. From Sri Krishna Lila Stava, the section Srimad Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram, praise of the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. I especially thought of reciting these verses in praise of Bhagavatam because you might think this history of Saubhari Muni, okay, you hear it once, I mean, how does it really relate to the core of your being? But Sanatana Goswami is explaining to you that everything in Srimad Bhagavatam, every syllable is saturated with Krishna Prem, love of Krishna. You may not be able to understand that now, but if you take the medicine, take the instructions of the acharyas, you will eventually see. So sometimes it's hard for our ordinary mind and intelligence to understand how reading about these various kings in Srimad Bhagavatam and the various incidents that they become entangled in or liberated from, you might say, well, what's the big deal? Krishna Lila, you certainly understand. The 10th canto, you understand how that is beyond any material paradigm. But the history of like Saubhari Muni, all right, he had a bit of a problem. In fact, people today wouldn't even call it a problem. He did great. Who wants to stay under the water, submerged? He came out and had a good time. He made it. He had not one, but 50 beautiful princesses who all competed for him. Every materialistic man's dream, right? That beautiful ladies fighting over you. Doesn't get any better than that, right? They don't want to say it. There's nothing better than that for the male ego. Just see, they're fighting over me. This history of Saubhari Muni produces in you detachment from material existence and attachment to Krishna. He's going to drop his austerities as a mystic yogi, get into enjoying opulence and gratifications big time, and then we'll hear today he's going to walk away from it all. Not only will he walk away from it all, but all his wives will follow him too. So let us first recite these verses from Srila Sanatana Goswami, glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. So please don't take this history of Saubhari Muni as anything less than a history that can impel you with pure love. And gradually, that realization will dawn. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we left off yesterday describing how Mandata, the chief executive of the entire world, was left without his false prestige. in the face of the opulence demonstrated by Saubhari Muni. Looks all great, doesn't it? Power, opulence, pleasure. Looking at what Saubhari Muni had, you could say it doesn't get any better than that. And he created it all by mantras with his mystic powers. He used his powers developed by austerity to produce material prosperity. The true goal, as you know, of austerity is not simply austerity in of itself, but it's meant to detach us from what is not for Krishna's pleasure so that we can attach ourselves to Krishna's pleasure. So in this way, you see that Saubhari Muni misused his mystic power. It seems that he was a bit foggy about what the goal of all his austerities and powers was. It seems even before he was attracted by the fish, he kind of had lost the plot, submerged there underwater. His bhakti commitment wasn't strong enough. He was too much leaning on dry austerity, dry renunciation, and development of mystic powers, mystic perfections. Krishna was not there strong enough in his life. So yes, he had it all. Magnificent, monumental. But as we left off yesterday, he was not at all satisfied. How could that be? You might be thinking, well, if we had his power and opulence, we'd be satisfied. We'd show him how to do it. But no, there's something essential about endeavors for material enjoyment. That essence is that you can't be satisfied. You hope, but your hopes are never fulfilled. And that's why you repeat one lifetime, one body after another. Because you always have material desires that are left over, that are never satisfied sufficiently, because that's impossible. So therefore, they spill over into the next life, next life, next life. In this way, the wheel of repeated birth and death keeps turning. What's pushing on the wheel and making it spin? Our unfulfilled desires. So you might say, well, solution's quite easy. Fulfill your desires. And then presto, what's done is done. Fulfill your desires, and then you can move on to something else. But desires, material desires, are never fulfilled. And that is the reality that's hitting Saubhari Muni. So Srimad Bhagavatam explains to us, in this way, Saubhari Muni enjoyed sense gratification in the material world, but he was not at all satisfied. Just as a fire never ceases blazing if constantly supplied with drops of fat. You keep dropping oil or fat into the fire, it doesn't say, okay, I've burned enough. My flames have had enough. No, the fire doesn't say that. Fire says more, more, more. So just like the fire is never ceasing to blaze, similarly, material desires never satisfy. The blaze, the inferno just goes on and on. We can only understand this by hearing. Hearing is a form of experience. It's the best way to experience. I was explaining to someone today because his question was good, that we hear these things, but how can you actually get concrete experience unless you experience in the traditional way, which means latch onto something with your senses, learn your lesson. But as we explained yesterday, you never learn your lesson. You repeat the same mistake again and again because you can't see the dynamics of the illusion. Those dynamics are about you're always being beckoned, enticed, invited. Come, come, come. That's always going on. But the satisfaction is never delivered. Perhaps a contemporary example is you go through so much trouble to order something online, setting up an account, login, name and password and this and that and the other. And then you find what you want to order and you click and you put it in the shopping cart, and then the payment page comes up and you put in your payment details and shipping details. Go through all that, and the website's very fancy, very flash. But what happens? The delivery never comes. So that is how Maya works. Very enticing, very flashy, making so many promises. Just tick this box if you want express delivery for an extra $20. If you want normal delivery, tick that box. Everything looks so efficient, so custom tailored for your enjoyment, right? But then the delivery never comes. Or if the delivery does come, the goods are damaged. And then you try to get a hold of the merchant, and the merchant never responds. That's how Maya works. Hey, illusory energy, you promised me satisfaction. Can we discuss this? No response. But you said that your customer service was 24/7. No response. So you can't learn this by ordinary experience. You have to experience through sound vibration. And that's not a deficient experience, to learn by sound vibration. With our material intelligence, we can't understand that. It would seem that hearing about Saubhari Muni and Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't replace your own endeavors and getting beat on the head, right? But the transcendental fact is that by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, the sound vibration coming through the ear brings you experience in a harmless way and in a potent way. In fact, in a way that stimulates your love of Krishna while detaching yourself from illusory energy. This is why Sanatana Goswami is glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam. He's like talking to a person, isn't he? Oh, Master, oh, Lord, Krishna himself. But in the beginning, it's hard for us to understand how reading a book and hearing a book gives you experience. For us, experience means something you actually can get your hands on, especially at this dark stage of Kali Yuga. The more you can get your hands on something, the more you think it's for real. But that so-called experience blunts your consciousness. And hearing Srimad Bhagavatam stimulates your higher consciousness and revives your love for Krishna. So this is bhakti mysticism. Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam gives you experience in the most valuable, profound, and impactful way. So I was explaining today to one up-and-coming devotee how material life is full of paradoxes. And sometimes people very eloquently portray those paradoxes. They say things like, life must be lived forwards, but can only be understood backwards. Or another one. Life gives you the test first and the lesson later. People say, oh, it's all about a learning process. It's all about learning your lesson. But in a normal educational process, you get the educational lesson first and then the test. But material existence doesn't work that way. First there's the test, and then later you may say, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done this. Now I have learned my lesson, but you paid such a price for learning the lesson afterwards and getting the test first. And so people become very upset by this. What kind of existence is this? The tests come first, and later you may learn some lesson. This doesn't make sense. So many people think life is just absurd. But as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, it's Maya, it's an illusion. But that illusion has a source, has a master. So another name for Krishna is Maheshwar, or the master of Maya. Every energy has a source, and that source is its master. We were speaking today about the fire never being satisfied, in that the fire doesn't stop blazing if you keep dropping oil on it. And in the same way, Saubhari Muni was never satisfied. He had it all, much more than you could ever conceive of materially. Still, with our pride, we think we will squeeze something out of material existence, right? Can you feel that pride lodged in within you? My body will generate good experiences for me. I've got a future. Fulfillment will be there. Maybe not 100%. I mean, I'm realistic. I'm not a utopian. There won't be 100% satisfaction, but I'll settle for 50. I'll settle for a few moments even. What else is there to do? This is our pride, as we explained yesterday. We have faith in our body and senses They're going to do it for me. They're going to bring me what I need, my body, my mind, my senses. So material existence means the spirit soul gives power of attorney to the material mind and senses. Yes, I give you full authorization to live my life for me. I was speaking with another devotee today about the relationship between time and money. Saubhari Muni had lots of wealth, but he's going to regret using his time and his mystic powers for producing material opulence. He's going to regret it. So I was discussing with this devotee how there's such a thing as time poverty, which is a major affliction these days. People who are living beyond their survival level are very absorbed in getting money, getting wealth, but they've forgotten that time is the real wealth. Such persons have no time because they're sacrificing everything for economic development. So the angle of time poverty is that you may be wealthy, you may be well off, but you'd be happier if you banked your time rather than simply banking the money. So sociological research has been done on a big scale and has established that those who make saving time their priority, saving time for activities other than cash-driven activities, those persons are the most satisfied in their social relationships, the most satisfied in their life. They make their decisions based on how can I have more time to do the things I want to do, not how can I have more money. This is an interesting angle. Of course, the famous statement by Chanaka Pandit, Ayusha Chana Eko Pi Nalabhya Swarna Koti Bi. You can't buy a moment's worth of time, spent time. You can't buy a moment of time that has passed with millions of gold coins. So while hearing about Saubhari Muni, we should think about this concept of time poverty. Sometimes it is said that, well, use your youthful energies to make your fortune now, and then in the future, you'll have more time for direct engagement, devotional service. There is justification for that. At the same time, we always have to bear in mind the next moment could be our last. So we have to balance the future plans with the reality that any one of us can go at any moment. There's something within us that feels like we'll just go on and on. Yes, the spirit soul will go on, but not in this body. So we're confused. We're mixing the eternality of the spirit soul with the fate of the material body. And that fate is the material body won't last and it can go at any moment. But we don't feel that, right? when you analyze your subjective being, you don't feel like right now that you could go at any moment, do you? Unless you've been diagnosed terminally. But ordinarily, you don't feel like, oh, any moment I could be finished. There's something in you that makes you feel that I'm just going to go on and on and on and on. Even though that is far from the fact. So we have to balance these two realities. If you're a householder, partner, children, you have to think to some degree of the future. At the same time, you also have to deal with the reality that in the future of your body may end tomorrow. Think, for example, when the earthquake hit Christchurch, earthquakes. The people who were inside the cathedral in Christchurch, they weren't thinking this is going to be the end. How many persons were finished? Radhika Baba, 200 or something inside the cathedral?
200 in general.
Yes. A big number that were inside the cathedral. They were just started off being a normal day. Still, there's something inside us that denies all that, denies the temporality, because we're spirit soul, and the spirit soul has no birth or death. But we're confused. We invest that feeling of eternality into our material existence, which is complete foolishness. This is why we need the tonic of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, so that we're detached from such illusion and attached to Krishna. So let's go on with Saubhari Muni. He's going to reflect. He's going to think. People today, they're so busy, they're under such pressure, they have no time to self-reflect. Life has become so hectic, not simply because of work pressures, but also because of the screens that dominate our life. You have to keep up with what's on your screens. People used to hail email as such a great breakthrough. Now so many people hate it. There's so many advice gurus and advice books giving you the secrets of how to achieve an empty inbox. That's like the supreme destination, an empty inbox. How to have an inbox with 0 in it. Here's the secret. Wait a minute. The internet email was supposed to be a great stride forward for humanity. Now there's so much worry. The internet's become a medium, not simply for pornography, that's fine, but it's become a medium for extremists and terrorists and all kinds of crazy people who can contact persons like them throughout the whole world. They were never able to do that before. And so you had just isolated pockets of extremist, weird persons. But now they can bond with each other, spanning the whole globe, and really feel like, yeah, we're important. We're massive. We're awesome. I'm not the only one. This shows us that technological advancement that is not firmly connected to spiritual development just kicks you in the face. The Amish in the USA have a good principle in that when there's a discussion about adopting a new technology, the elders meet and discuss thoroughly, how will this technology affect what is most important to us? What is most important to us? Our community values, our families. If, in the name of technological progress, those factors that are most valuable to us become threatened, we don't want the technology. There's so much good sense in that. Of course, we're following the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, the direct followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who taught us yukta vairagya, real renunciation, using the material energy for Krishna's pleasure rather than rejecting it. But in our using various material devices, various material facilities, by using them for Krishna's pleasure, we have to make sure that we're able to digest such usage without having indigestion. We can't just blindly say, well, it's all Krishna's energy, so we're going to use this, we're going to use that. We always have to keep an eye on our spiritual development and how that development is affected. Just because you have a smartphone or email doesn't, or Facebook, all glories to Facebook. Just because you have that doesn't mean you have to drown in it. There has to be some discipline. There has to be some consciousness of where your time is going. We can't just say, well, Yukta Vairagya Prabhu is using everything in Krishna service. Don't question me when I'm spending hours on my screens. We have to always monitor our contact with the material energy, even though we know the material energy is Krishna's and meant to be used for his pleasure. We're tiny particles of consciousness. We have our limits in terms of how much we can digest regarding using material things for Krishna's pleasure. Our main activity is chanting Hare Krishna, individually and together. Our main activity is hearing about Krishna. So Saubhari Muni had some time to reflect. Not only time, he had the bandwidth, he had the headspace. Wait a minute, what's happened to me? My life has just gone over the cliff. So the Bhagavatam describes, thereafter, one day, while Saubhari Muni, who was expert in chanting mantras, was sitting in a secluded place, he thought to himself about the cause of his fall down, which was simply that he had associated himself with the sexual affairs of the fish. Because of his offending Garuda, a material disease came upon him. The disease of material attachment came upon him just by seeing a couple of fish procreating. And as we explained yesterday, that's nothing compared, of course, to what you have to see on every street, on every screen in this day and age. There's so much provocation saturating the atmosphere that you just take it as normal. That's the way the world is. That's life. Just think, if you're a kid growing up today, what do you have to handle? What a Nitai or Arjuna or Yamuna will have to handle. An atmosphere saturated with provocation. An atmosphere in which lust and greed is just in your face 24/7. Saubhari Muni had some advantages. He, in spite of his huge opulence, his palaces and 50 wives, 100 children from each wife, these people were powerful. He was sitting in a secluded place, and he's able to think to himself, what happened? I lost the plot. I went off the road. So the Bhagavatam will spend 7 verses describing how Saubhari Muni regained his balance after his having plunged headlong into extraordinary opulence. So his downfall is so mesmerizing, and his recovery is also mesmerizing. He expresses regret. Ahoyamam pashata me vinasham tapasvinas such charita vratasya antarjale badi chara prasangat prachyavitam brahma chirang dritam yat. Alas, while practicing austerity, even within the depths of the water, and while observing all the rules and regulations practiced by saintly persons, I lost the results of my long austerities simply by association with the sexual affairs of fish. Everyone should observe this fall down and learn from it. He's doing us a favor. He's giving you his own true story and saying, look, observe, study what happened to me, learn from it. He squandered his backlog of credits brought about by long austerities. He said, I was following all the rules and regulations in the depth of the water. But he offended a Vaishnava. And his grip on bhakti was not strong. His grip was mainly consisting of these austerities and development of yogic mystic powers. So he was, from both of these angles, he was not in the strongest position. Taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet is the strongest position, not taking shelter of mystic powers or mental speculation. What to speak of karmic activities. So he's inviting you. Isn't that very generous of him? Everyone should observe this fall down and learn from it. So he's giving you conclusions from his practical experience. He didn't have the association of Krishna Bhaktas. He was all alone. We should never underestimate the wealth of associating with devotees. Even if you don't get along with the devotees all the time, they sometimes annoy you. One married lady was telling me today, oh, thank you for that I have such a nice husband, even though he can annoy me. Because of our material imperfections, sometimes devotees can seem to get on your nerves or bug you. We've explained this before, but we should never overlook the wealth represented by their association. So Srila Prabhupada writes in a purport here, the Krishna consciousness movement is creating many centers just to create devotees, so that by associating with the members of such a center, people will automatically become uninterested in material affairs. Although this is an ambitious proposal, this association is proving effective by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. By gradually associating with the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, simply by taking prasad and taking part in chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, ordinary persons are being considerably elevated. We're not Saubhari Muni, performing severe austerities for a long time, submerged under the water, developing extraordinary mystic powers so that we can create out of nowhere a new body for ourselves, palace with servants and luxuries, and we're ordinary persons, yet we're becoming elevated because of association. So this is our mission statement, stated another way. At the Bhakti Center, Bhakti Lounge here, and the Loft in Auckland, our motto is, we make it easy. We make it easy to come to Bhakti. We make it easy to grow in Bhakti. And we make it easy to distribute Bhakti to others. We make it easy. And so the same point is being made here in this purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Krishna conscious movement is creating many centers just to create devotees, so that by associating with the members of such a center, with the devotees, people will automatically become uninterested in material affairs. That is the topmost mystic perfection. By your association, persons are becoming uninterested in material affairs. That is real mystic yoga. Saubhari Muni didn't have that kind of association under the water. Not only did he not have that kind of inspiring association, but he had a problem with Garuda. He tried to prevent Garuda from achieving his goals. And so he had a problem. So we'll recite text 52. Ekastapasyaham atambasi matsya sangat. Panchashvat asam uttapancha sahasra saga. Nantam vrajam yubaya kritya manoratana. Maya gunai hrita vishayirta bhava. Ekasta pasya hamatam bhasi matsya sangat. Panchashat asam uta pancha sahasra saga. Nantam brajam yubaya kritya manoratanam. Maya gunai hrita vishayirta bhava. Ekasta paspya hamatam bhasi matsya sangat. Panchashat asamuta pancha sahasra sarga. Nantam brajam yubaya kritya manoratanam. Maya guna hitamati vishayata bhava. Vaishnavis. Eka, one only, tapasvi, great sage, aham, I, ata, thus, ambasi, in the deep water, matsya sangat, by associating with the fish. Panchashat, 50, asam, got wives. Uta, and what to speak of, begetting 100 sons in each of them. Panchasahasra sarga, procreation of 5,000. Na antam, no end. Rajami, I can find. Ubhaya kritya, duties of this life and the next. Manoratana, mental concoctions. Maya gunai, influenced by the modes of material nature. Prita, lost. Mati, vishaye, great attraction for material things. Artabhava, matters of self-interest. Translation. In the beginning, I was alone and engaged in performing the austerities of mystic yoga. But later, because of the association of fish engaged in sex, I desired to marry. Then I became the husband of 50 wives, and in each of them I begot 100 sons. And thus my family increased to 5,000 members. By the influence of the modes of material nature, I became fallen and thought that I would be happy in material life. Thus, there is no end to my material desires for enjoyment in this life and the next. Om Jnana Chimarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So he's explaining the problem with bad association. It's not simply the fish you should blame. He didn't have any excellent association. His whole thing was to be alone, submerged in the water, not bothered by anyone, so he could focus on developing his mystic powers. So he's giving you a sketch of how he went wrong. He says, Ekastapasyaham. The great sage me was one only, a solitary yogi, powerful yogi, alone under the water. What happened? Instead of Eka, one, now Panchasahasra Sarga, 5,000. So he's like, what happened here? Not only Ekastapasyaham, one great sage who's only one, but Ambasi. I was in deep water, submerged. Now look at me. I've got a whole dynasty. What happened? And the acharyas explain in their commentary that first there was one, then there was 50, and then there was 5,000. Things really mushroomed or blossomed or exploded. And so he psychoanalyzes himself. I thought I would be happy in material life, but I can see there's no end to my material desires for enjoyment in this life and the next. He's not an ordinary Kali Yuga sense enjoyer. He's thinking, I want to enjoy in this life and the next one too. So he's got a lot on his plate, you know. I got to live life so I can enjoy my mystic power now. And then, of course, I know there's a next life, and I want at least the same standard of living in my next life. It's quite a burden to carry. So we should take note of his realizations. He calls himself fallen. Why? because I thought I would be happy in material life. He says, that means I'm fallen. Remember, we talked about pride. Pride doesn't mean simply sticking out your chest as the stereotype version of male pride is. Pride means I have faith that my body and senses will bring me pleasure. That is pride and arrogance. So you might say, what is so dangerous about Saubhari Muni thinking he'd be happy in material life? But he says, that means I'm fallen. And the result of that misconception is that there's no end to my material desires in this life and the next. He said, he's smart enough to understand this is going to go on and on. This is going to spill over into my next life. It's not done when I'm dead. He has the Vedic sense to understand that he's drowning in actions for being happy in this life and the next. His self-reflection and his thinking to himself in a secluded place allowed him to bounce back. What happened? He did pass his life in household affairs for some time. And remember, as we were discussing earlier, time is a most precious thing. You've got to use it very carefully. We spoke about how sociological research shows that those who prioritize time as the number one asset are the happiest in terms of their social relations, in terms of their relative self-satisfaction, as much as that can be known on the material platform. So Saubhari Muni passed his life in household affairs for some time. But then detachment took over. And he entered vanaprastha life, retiring from household affairs. And he went to the forest. In that time, in that period of classic Vedic civilization centered in India, kings would maintain in their land forests specifically for vanaprasthas. You don't see that today. You're in your 50s and 60s, you want to renounce, and there's a special forest where you can, designated for you, where you can live with your partner in the forest. Again, another factor which shows us we don't have a real human civilization today. So not only did Saubhari Muni head to the forest, but his wives followed him. They took advantage of his revived spiritual dedication and followed him into the forest. So he took up his austerities once again in the forest and left his body and went to the supreme destination. And what about his 50 wives? They also attained the same destination because of their good fortune in following his tutelage. Sukadeva Goswami explains, O Maharaj Pritchett, by observing their husband progressing in spiritual existence, Saubhari Muni's wives were also able to enter the spiritual world by his spiritual power. Just as the flames of a fire cease when the fire is extinguished. Their material life was finished, and therefore they had no future in material existence. They observed their husband's progress in spiritual life and followed suit. The purport explains that if a woman is fortunate enough to get a suitable husband who's spiritually advanced, and if she always engages in his service, she also gets the same benefit as her husband. Yes, that is the classic Vedic system. But the reality that we have to deal with at this point in time is that we try to train everyone, man, woman, husband, wife, everyone in spiritual dedication, so that each partner, each potential partner, can help the other. Vedic civilization is male-centric because the men were so qualified. The reality these days is that the men don't have those qualities as during the Vedic days. So therefore we train everyone so that the wife can help the husband can help the wife. When one is up and the other's down, the one who's up helps the one who's down, and then later it switches. The one who's down becomes up, and life is so tumultuous these days. The best principle is to train everyone to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. It's not like the classic Vedic times, which were admittedly blatantly male-centric, but the men were supposed to be so qualified. In the absence of that assurity of male qualification, we have to train everyone. And we can see sometimes the ladies are more powerful, sometimes the men are more spiritually powerful. So we have to be an equal opportunity employer. Everyone gets a chance to be all that they can be. Because these are not classic Vedic times, where a lady just has to think, I'll just marry the right husband and ride on his coattails. He'll do all the spiritual advancement, and just because I'm with him, I'll attain the spiritual world. Because that guarantee is not there, that such men always exist or are there for everyone. We have to train every person, male or female, become capable of standing on your own 2 feet spiritually and helping others. This is the reality of this day and age. So when you read these kind of purports in Srimad Bhagavatam, which are male-centric, you have to take into account the Vedic paradigm, which presupposes strong men. When you add that into the equation, you may not see it. It's there in the equation, but you may not see it. When you add the presupposition of strong men into the equation, or recognize it's there, then everything makes sense. Otherwise, you may get indignant. What is all that? I had an experience once. I was somewhere in the world, not in Australia, New Zealand, and a godbrother who I knew since 1973. In fact, I had met him on the street in New York City and invited him to come to the temple when he was in material existence. So this is about the year 2000. He invited me to his house for lunch. And he had a young wife. He wasn't a Prabhupada disciple. He was some other he decided in his late 50s to marry. And so his wife was in her early 30s. So he invited me over for lunch. We were old friends for decades. And so then after lunch, we chat a bit. So he had like a 2-seater couch. And so I sat on the couch, and he had to do some quick business on the phone. He was just right across the room at his desk on the phone. And then all of a sudden, his young wife comes and plops herself down on the and she plopped herself down right there. And so Maharaj, how's everything? And I looked over at my godbrother, whose complexion was rather dark, but it was red when I looked over, but he was on the phone and turning red. So I thought, oh my God, how am I going to handle this situation? So she just plopped herself, how are you, Maharaj? And this and that. So all I could think of was, the only thing I could think of to say, because I was so embarrassed for her husband, I started glorifying her husband. Oh, you did such a smart thing marrying him. He's such a spiritually qualified person. You really made the right choice. You'll benefit so much by his association. That's all I could think of to say, because I felt for for him, my godbrother. He's on the phone, but he's watching, and and he couldn't just, the way family life is, he couldn't just put the phone down and tell his wife, "Hey, will you get off the couch?" He has to tread carefully. He's dealing with a sweet young thing. So all I could think of was just to, glorify her husband. That's the first thing that came to my mind. You really made the right choice. I've known him since 1973. He's such a wonderful devotee. He'll be of such an inspiration to. I thought that was the most appropriate thing to do. Later, I got a message from her. You have insulted me. You have said that my only value is because of my husband. You have said I have no value whatsoever, and only because of him can I make any spiritual advancement. I went to my godbrother and said, did you see what she wrote? I'm sorry, Mars, I can't say anything. I'm sorry, that's the way that generation is. And I said, well, I expected a bit more than that, other than that's the way this generation is. And, he couldn't correct her. He couldn't say anything. He didn't want to say anything. He had to keep peace at home, So out of respect for him, I decided, well, she's totally twisted 100% whatever I said, and she totally doesn't understand how what she did was outrageous. Anyway, I'll apologize to her. So I actually went to her and I apologized. I'm sorry that you think I said that you have no value, and just because of your husband, you're able to make spiritual advancement. I didn't say that, but I'm sorry you think I said that. Unfortunately, she lasted maybe another 5 years, and well, won't go into the rest. Shall we say she diversified her portfolio. So this is an example of how there can be such volatile misunderstanding when comparing the Vedic times and statements about the classic Vedic culture with the mayhem that we have today. As I said in the beginning of this topic, the Vedic literature presupposes men who are competent, potent, and have the ability and to be responsible and care. But as the 12th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam says, one of the symptoms of the age of Kali is that Dam Pache Biruchi Hetu, men and women are together just because of physical attraction. You say, well, that's normal. No, it's Bhagavatam says that's a symptom of the most degraded age. And that if a man can maintain one wife and a couple of children, he's known as a great Mahatma. We have any great Mahatmas here? Gopal Guru. According to Shukadeva Goswami, this is a rare event. In other words, no question of Saubhari Muni with 50 wives and 100 children from each. If you can just maintain one wife and 2 children, you're considered an extraordinary personality in the age of Kali. People ask, well, how do you do it? Can you tell us the secret? So that's the Bhagavatam's vision. Men and women shack up together just because of physical attraction. And when the physical attraction fizzles out, that's it for the relationship. This is all considered the essence of the age of Kali, the age of darkness. So when we read these purports, you have to know what they're presupposing and what's missing today. And then things start to click. Otherwise, sometimes the ladies get angry, or the men push it down their throats. We are superior. Except when nighttime comes. So when we have a true understanding of the degradation of today, we can appreciate that even though we can't apply Vedic civilization 100%, at least recognize it is the best. It is superior. That much we should know. So we can learn a lot from Saubhari Muni. He did live happily ever after in the end, and so did his wives. But he went through a dramatic transformation. First of all, with his mystic power, he transformed his body from a decrepit body to a stunningly handsome body. But the greatest transformation was his changing directions, getting himself back on track again. in terms of his spiritual development. And his wives benefited from that supremely.